Hi, I'm Bhante Sujato, and I'm coming to you from the end of the world. And this is the second in what, I don't know, maybe a series. So far I've done one on the Planet of the Humans, the documentary about climate change, and I thought I would do another one this morning on cryptocurrency. In case you don't want to listen to the whole thing, let me sum up right here at the beginning. Cryptocurrency is bad and it shouldn't exist. We should ban it, and as well as all of the derivatives and associated technologies. It's not bad in the way of something that sort of happens to have some flaws that can be rectified. It's bad in the way that it is evil from its conception and has no purpose other than doing evil. And it is setting back the world and making the world a worse place. We would be better off without it. Please don't buy or use cryptocurrencies in any form, and don't believe what people tell you about them. Unless, of course, it's me. I'm not going to go too much into all of the details about the technical details of cryptocurrency, but I will leave a couple of links in the talk for anybody who wants to look at it by people who know much more about these things than I do. But what I will do is give a bit of a technical overview and summary about what we're talking about, and then talk about what I'm most interested in, which is the moral and spiritual dimensions of why cryptocurrency and allied technologies are so corruptive and such a decadent lessening and diminishment of the human soul. So please settle back. I'm not in any particular hurry to grab a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and let's go on a little bit of a journey together. So cryptocurrency, let's do definition of a few terms. The word crypto, of course, is from encryption. Encryption just means that a digital message is essentially enclosed at one end and then opened up at the other end. So you sort of have two parts. One is the message and one is the key to open it, usually a password or something like that. So encryption is good. If you're listening to this on the web, probably your connection is encrypted, and it means that people can't snoop on what you're listening to or what you're doing they can't snoop on it, basically. So encryption is a good thing, but the word crypto in cryptocurrency doesn't really, it's not really talking about encryption as such. It's talking about the fact that in these kinds of currencies, encryption is used. Okay, so then we have the word cryptocurrency itself. So cryptocurrency means a class of programs which are similar to Bitcoin and which are derived from it. There are, of course, many different cryptocurrencies these days, but Bitcoin is still by far the biggest and most important. The history of Bitcoin, by the way, is quite fascinating, and I'm sure that the allure of the history of it and its creator is part of the reason why it's still such a kind of romantic idea. Bitcoin is created essentially of two interrelated technologies. The first is what's called the blockchain. Now, one of the things you find in discussions of crypto is that there's a lot of terminology and ideas which sound very mysterious and so on, but actually they're pretty straightforward. Not to say that there's not some technical accomplishment in being able to create things. They're certainly complicated, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are good. So blockchain is nothing hugely fancy or incomprehensible. Blockchain is just a spreadsheet. That's it. So when people are talking about blockchain, they're just talking about a spreadsheet. But it's a spreadsheet that has a few peculiar qualities. One is that it is distributed. So when you invest in Bitcoin or whatever, you end up with a copy of the blockchain. That is a copy of the spreadsheet on your own computer. So everyone has a copy of it. So it's a distributed spreadsheet. And it also is append only. So you can't erase things from the blockchain. You can only add things to it. So the blockchain continually gets bigger as it goes on. Now, that might seem like an incredibly inefficient way of doing things, and that would be because it really is. So typically, Bitcoin can do, I think it was 7 transactions per second globally, something like that. I mean, the amount of power, energy, and computational complexity that's required to do anything with these technologies is completely ridiculous. Which is why, of course, they've never been actually used to build anything useful. So the idea is kind of cool. The idea is that you make financial transactions, or in more modern versions like Ethereum, it can be any kind of contract or any kind of transaction. And because that transaction is recorded on everybody's computer and it can never be deleted or unmade, then you have a source of security. Of course, the relevant personal information and so on is encrypted, so not everybody can see all the details of the transactions, but you need to have the encryption key to be able to unlock all the specific details. So this is how it gives you security. Then the second part of the Bitcoin technology is what's called Bitcoin mining. And Bitcoin mining, again, sort of sounds fancy and everything, but basically it's just solving a problem. So you have a mathematical problem, 1 + 1 = 2, and if you solve that problem, then a Bitcoin is created. It's a bit like when if you sign up to a website or something, and they have like one of those captchas that allows you to sign in. So you have to sort of solve this problem before you can get in there. So that's basically how the Bitcoin mining works. The problem is that it's also a bit like Space Invaders. It gets harder as you go on. I apologize for my dated video game reference, but Space Invaders is about the last video game that I ever played. And so as you go to each level, it gets faster and it gets harder. So that's the same thing as Bitcoin mining does. It gets harder as you go on. By now, it's not just 1 + 1 = 2. By now, the problems that are being solved by Bitcoin miners are incredibly computationally intensive, which is why they require massive server farms to solve these problems. Now, these technologies, the blockchain and Bitcoin mining, were developed specifically in order to create essential properties of a currency. So Bitcoin mining is created especially to create scarcity, to create artificial scarcity. I'm going to come back to that point later on. Just as a side note, there are other approaches which are being used for guaranteeing scarcity. Bitcoin, of course, as the first one, is possibly the most primitive, but it's still the most popular. Other ones have yet to achieve any kind of scale. Then the blockchain is there to ensure trust. So because everybody can see the transactions on the blockchain, even though you can't see the personally identifying information, then you can have trust as to what's going on. Nobody can do anything sneaky with the blockchain. You can't erase what's been done. It's just everything is just added onto the end of it. In theory, of course. So this is how Bitcoin was originally intended to be a currency that would supplement and perhaps even replace conventional currencies. Of course, Bitcoin spectacularly has failed as a currency because the cost, or the energetic cost and computational cost of doing transactions is so ridiculously high. That it's effectively useless as a currency, and so crypto has kind of pivoted to be used as what crypto advocates will call a store of value, but which is in fact a speculative asset. So really, you're just kind of gambling on pixie dust. Actually, it's just nothing really. It's just you just put money into something and then hope to get more money out of it. So that's really what Bitcoin is. So Bitcoin again crypto has basically two main parts. One is a part that will create artificial scarcity, and the other is a part that will guarantee trust. And both of these parts have rather spectacularly and systematically failed to achieve the things that they claim to achieve. But, of course, it's just around the corner, right? The next version will do it and the problems will be solved and so on. And so we're constantly being promised this utopia, this blockchain utopia around the corner. Now, crypto... I should actually define one further term before going on, and that's a more recent one that's come up. It's called Web 3. So Web 3 is, of course, unlike, say, Bitcoin mining or blockchain, which refer to actual technologies. Web 3 is purely a buzzword that doesn't actually refer to anything in particular, but it's more like a philosophical idea that everything is going to be on the blockchain. So they're going to make everything part of the blockchain. This is just a kind of a new idea, which probably has gained prominence because of the increasing toxicity of the brand of cryptocurrency. People were seeing through it for what it is. We have sort of a new term that sounds like it means something. But in fact, what Web3 is really about is locking up information and requiring that you have the keys to be able to access anything, and to wrap the simplicity of the web in a massive increase of complexity and computational intensity to achieve the same thing. Of course, Web3, like so much of the supposed crypto revolution, doesn't actually exist, and in all probability, we can only pray will never exist. But anyway, it's being touted around as a buzzword these days. So what's the moral problem here? What's wrong with crypto? What's actually the ethical corruption that lies at the heart of it? The ethical problem, one of the basic ethical problems with the whole area of crypto, I believe, is that it aims to create scarcity out of abundance. This, I think, is the original sin of crypto. Nature is abundant. Nature offers us all the air that we could want to breathe. Nature offers us all of the water that we could want to drink. Nature offers us food. Nature offers us space. Nature offers us a warm light in the sky. And we are born into a world that is almost uncannily adjusted for our own health, happiness, and well-being, certainly compared to the rest of the universe. So we have all of this abundance, and yet, of course, not everything is abundant. And certain kinds of foods are not abundant, or certain kinds of goods and so on are not abundant. And so to deal with that and to manage that lack of abundance, that scarcity, we invent what we call the economy. And the economy is there to essentially allow us to say, well, one person has mangoes, another person has oranges, and how does the person with mango get oranges and the person with oranges get mangoes? And so how do you get the things that you don't have but that you want or that you need? And so the economy really is there to supplement the abundance of the natural world. When we move into the digital era, then there is a rather fundamental shift in how the economy operates, because digital properties, intellectual properties, words, images, sounds, can be copied and shared at a vanishingly small cost. And so what was once scarce, that is to say knowledge, information, is now abundant. Whereas in the past we would have to pay hundreds of dollars to buy a paper copy of the Encyclopedia Britannica, now we can look up Wikipedia. So we all know this, and this has been a part of the digital landscape since its beginning, and particularly has shaped the copyright as applied to digital technologies. In the past, to copy a book, for example, would be a difficult and labor-intensive process. These days, anybody can do it. So copyright is itself problematic, but it is an attempt to ensure that in certain cases that the scarcity of goods is retained, specifically so that creators of creative material can make a living from their work. Now, I'm not going to go into copyright here. I think that it's a extremely inefficient and misguided way of achieving that objective, but at least it does have a sort of a limited and clear and understandable objective in that way, so that creative people can get paid for their jobs. Crypto tries to generalize this, and especially Web3 is now trying to generalize this so that it's not just creative works which are scarce, but anything can be scarce. So you're no longer trying to get income for the work that you've done. You're trying to get income by just having some digital thing and making money out of that. And so this, of course, is selfishness. This is greed. This is a complete lack of responsibility. And the more that people get money for nothing, the more it will corrupt their soul. Money itself is neutral, and those who earn money by working for it will appreciate it. They know the effort that's gone into it. But when you start to build an economy on the idea that you just do nothing and get money, then you are corrupting the human soul. I mean, for any any Buddhist listening to this, and you want to say we don't have a soul or whatever, I'm kind of using it like in a kind of euphemistic way. Not please let not the non-selfists have a go at me. Anyway, so where was I? Yes, creating scarcity out of abundance. So in addition to the obvious fact that this is simply making human morals worse, there's an even deeper problem, which is that it's solving entirely the wrong problem. The problem is not how do we make this scarce resource, this abundant resource, scarce. I mean, this is crazy. Why would you do that? Why would I take the air and sell it to people? Why would I take water and bottle it and sell it to people? This is crazy. I mean, sure, look, there is a case for bottled water for convenience or something like that, but that's only like a small sector of it. No one's talking about like bottling all the water in the world and making it so that whenever you use water that you have to pay for it. But this is what the Web3 advocates are really saying at their heart, that everything should be owned, everything should be locked up. And once again, it's answering entirely the wrong question. The problem is, if it's a problem, the problem is that a resource that was formerly scarce is now abundant. And so the economic equation of that has changed. And so this, my answer should be that this should step outside of the realm of economics. Since information is itself almost free to create and distribute, then we shouldn't consider it to be an economic good anymore. We should consider it to be like the air or the water. And then that would give us, rather than a sense of exploitation over information, it should give us a sense of care and responsibility. We should look after our infosphere in the same way that we look after our ecosphere. Well, obviously we don't look after our ecosphere. I'm living in a fantasy world here. But I'm trying to point out that there is another way of looking at this. Let me give you another example of it. Imagine that you're living in your home. You share your home with some other housemates, and you buy, say, a dozen eggs and put them in the fridge, and then you come back the next breakfast to make some eggs, and you find that 2 of them have gone, and you're like, "Why is that?" And then it turns out that your flatmate has had a couple of the eggs, and they say, "Oh, look, I'm sorry, it's just a couple of eggs. I didn't know that was such a big deal." And you're like, "But, I was planning for those eggs to last me for the whole week." And they was like, "Well, it's only a couple of eggs." And he said, "But you don't understand. Like, I don't actually have any money. I mean, I only got enough money to just pay for these eggs and for a few other things for this week, and that's all I've got." And your friend is like, "Oh, I didn't know that, actually." Well, I tell you what, if you think that that's a problem, how about we do this as a solution? What we can do is we can buy a series of little safes, right? So little egg-sized safes with pass keys on them, so that each time that we buy an egg, we can put the egg in the safe, and we can only the person with the code can open the safe and get the egg out, and that's the way that we can solve this problem. And so we're going to have to live in a world where not only are we paying for all of these safes, but where we can't even use an egg without knowing the passcode. And of course, if you forget the passcode, well, you don't get to eat your egg. Obviously, this is madness, and this is the world that the blockchain advocates want for us, and the world that the Web3 advocates want for us. An alternative approach would be to have some compassion, to care about each other, to sit down as a group and as a community and say, well, we have this resource, but some of the people among us don't have enough to be able to eat, and others have enough. So why don't we share? Why don't we work together? If we contribute, if we all think about giving and sharing, then we'll have plenty for everyone. And we don't have to create scarcity out of abundance. So the whole idea of creating scarcity out of abundance is inherently immoral if it's applied as a general principle. And yet this is fundamental to the idea of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So why do they do this? Like, what's the underlying principle or the underlying philosophy? Well, Bitcoin and other cryptos are fueled by this kind of tendency in Silicon Valley of this kind of libertarian extremism, fueled by Ayn Rand and others of a similar ilk, who regard government as a unnecessary oversight, who imagine that they are the prophets of a new world of amazing things, and governments just kind of get in the way with all their regulations and so on. And so the idea behind these things is to create something that's outside of the purview of government, so that people can get on and just do their thing without those pesky rules and regulations. Now, there's a bunch of layers and depths to this. So first thing is that, well, I mean, just as an obvious practical thing, is that financial regulations are good. Rules are good. And it's good that there is oversight on financial activities. In fact, there's not nearly enough oversight on financial activities. And when you leave financial activities unchecked, and speculation, investment, and so on, then you end up with booms and busts, and you end up with all kinds of inequalities and criminal activity, and you end up with a festering pit of exploitation, of Ponzi schemes, of criminality. You end up with broken dreams and broken lives, and you end up in tears. You end up with something that, well, resembles the crypto world quite strongly. So this is why governments have introduced financial regulations. There's a reason for them. One of the delusions of the crypto community is to imagine that somehow they will escape and can escape regulation. I mean, the whole technology was built for this. One of the things that you find with the crypto world, one of the irrationalities of it, is that the things which it's for, the things that it is, its advantages, the things that the problems that it's supposed to solve, it is routinely shown to not actually solve those problems. And yet when that happens, people will look at it and say, well, yes, actually it doesn't solve that problem, but this is the thing that will actually do, until you've gone through and got rid of all of the things that it was supposed to do. It was supposed to be a currency. Well, it doesn't work. It was supposed to be unregulatable. Well, it doesn't work. It was supposed to promise security. Well, it doesn't work. It was supposed, and all of these things, and yet none of that changes people's commitment to it. I had an interesting conversation just the other day with an old friend who, according to his own testimony, was like, yes, I bought into the cult of crypto. He said, I've studied cults and I know what a cult is, and this is a cult, and I have become susceptible to it. And we had this discussion, and he was putting all of these things, and yes, he agreed. Each one of these things doesn't work, and this is not actually... Crypto isn't actually achieving any of the things systematically, one by one, that it claims to do. And yet, still, he will adhere to it because he's become addicted to this cult. It's a rare degree of self-awareness. But of course, the reality is that it's perfectly easy for governments to regulate cryptocurrency. You just make a law. You can't use cryptocurrency. You can't do mining. I mean, mining has to be done on servers, which are physical things, and a government can say, you can't do that on our soil. Governments can say, you can't make transactions in Bitcoin. You can't make transactions in crypto. And crypto advocates will then say, well, you can't enforce that. By which they mean that they intend to commit crime. So if you say that laws can't be enforceable, what you mean is you don't intend to keep the law. Now, there is some extent to which, yeah, of course, it's going to be difficult to regulate and to enforce totally, but much of the crypto world is perfectly easy to enforce. You can easily say, a country can easily say that, websites can't accept payments in bitcoins, that you can't sell apps in the app store that for crypto, and so on and so forth. So sure, if you're a hacker, can you get around these things? Yeah, of course you can. But for the mainstream user, which of course is what crypto is targeting, then you can absolutely regulate it. And in fact, a number of countries around the world, China and India and plenty of other places, are starting to regulate in various different ways. So once again, this idea that you can't regulate crypto is just a fantasy. It's a kind of teenage rebellion idea that you can kind of sit around in your room and just sort of have some kind of cool digital thing and then just kind of make money out of it. It's like you're living in a video game where you just sort of have these imaginary assets from your video game, and then that somewhat correlates to some real world thing. But it's just an immature fantasy. And the fact that there are so many supposedly mature people who buy into this stuff is not a sign that it is more than a immature fantasy. It's a sign that our society has become infantilized, and that so many of the people who are in positions of power and authority and who should know better have not learned to grow up. So crypto is built on this fantasy of being unregulable, unregulable, irregularityed. Anyway, that you can't regulate it. And it escapes the oversight of the financial regulators, and it escapes the global finance system. Now, this is an interesting little twist on the ideology that underlies Bitcoin. Now, if you look at Ayn Rand and this kind of where it's coming from, then these kinds of philosophies are, I don't know quite how to put it exactly, Nazi adjacent. And when people start in Western conspiracy theories, there is a vortex or a spiral where any conspiracy theory, if it is allowed unchecked, it will inevitably spiral inwards towards the blood libel. That's where they all end up. The blood libel is an idea propagated most famously in the forgery, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which maliciously accused the Jewish people of bathing in the blood of children in order to gain immortal life. Now, this blood libel is a mainstay of QAnon and related conspiracy thinking, and conspiracy ideation sort of converges on this blood libel, and it like crosses an event horizon where the underlying reality, the underlying motivation is unmasked, and where that will be taken on as an explicit idea. And this, of course, has happened with QAnon. So when you see something that an ideology, a movement who demonizes global finance, then this is an anti-Semitic dog whistle. What they mean is the Jews who control the banks. And the undercurrent of anti-Semitism is absolutely a part of the whole ideology of cryptocurrency, which is why Nazis love crypto. Nazis love it. They love it so much. And if you're a white supremacist, and if you're a Nazi, then I can pretty much guarantee that you've got substantial investments in crypto. They just love it. Now, I'm just a monk. I don't know much about finance. I don't know much about economics. I don't know much about money and all of these kinds of things. I haven't owned any money for the last 25 years of my life. And I never do shopping. I mean, very rarely. Just yesterday, I went shopping for the first time and I don't know where. I need a new chair for my office. So that's a big deal for me. And I walked around, found a shop selling office chairs, spoke to the guy and so on, found a chair that's nice. And then I spoke to the guy, well, actually, I don't have any money. I can't buy this thing. So hopefully I'll be able to find somebody who can help me out and who can come and use the donations that people have offered to be able to get this chair. And that's it. That's probably the most shopping that I'll do for this, 6 months or a year or something like that. So that's me. As I'm a monk, I don't really know anything about these things. But I do know one thing that I'm pretty confident on, and that is this. When the Nazis are on your side, you're on the wrong side. So those who are using crypto should maybe be asking themselves, why is it that my values are aligning so neatly with the values of the Nazis? And I would say that it's because the whole idea of crypto, what's underlying it, is essentially a fascist ideology. So people who talk up crypto and who have this kind of idea about it and so on, they like to think that they're doing something revolutionary. They like to think that they're kicking back against the system and yada, yada, yada. In fact, crypto is really just an evolution. It's the next stage in extremist neoliberalism, which gives the cult of the individual the ability to escape from government oversight, the ability to escape from any kind of personal or social responsibility, and which hides behind technical language and ideology in an attempt to get away with its sheer greed. Now, because crypto is really a sort of an evolution of neoliberal philosophy, not a replacement of it, then it is perhaps unsurprising that for all the talk about being unable to regulate it, that the old finance has become increasingly interested in crypto and in associated technologies. And we're seeing that in America now. For example, just as one example, and I'm just looking now at a recent article, December the 7th article in The Economist, entitled, crypto lobbying is going ballistic. So this is reporting that the market value of crypto assets worldwide has risen to $2.4 trillion. Some places like El Salvador have sought to ride the wave, embracing crypto to gain celebrity. Others, such as China and India, have threatened to ban it. Watchdogs in America and Europe, the home to much crypto trading activity, by contrast, are only just beginning to sniff around digital assets. All of a sudden, lobbying is on a rocket ship. And so you have various kinds of interests based on public disclosures. The first 9 months of 2021, $5 million was spent lobbying the American Senate. And this is kind of ramping up at a huge rate. And we're seeing involved with that the Chamber of Commerce, the Andreessen. We're seeing various Coinbase, a big crypto exchange, and various other kind of big companies which are involved in this kind of lobbying. So one of the first questions that we should ask about is, how is this kind of possible if the promise of crypto is decentralization? So again, no regulations, it's secure, it's escaping government oversight and so on. But being decentralized is one of the other big talking points of crypto. They think that being decentralized is great. But if it's really decentralized, then how come you've got these big firms that are spending millions of dollars to lobby the government on it? Well, obviously it's not decentralized. Obviously there are people in the middle who are making all the money out of it, just as they are with everything else. And the advocates of decentralization are really completely missing the point and misunderstanding what decentralization is and how it works. See, the thing is, pretty much anything is decentralized by default. Consider fire, for example. Fire is like super decentralized. You go outside, pick up a couple of sticks, rub it together, you got some fire. And that's really useful. Boil some water, cook your meal, light your house, warm yourself. It's great. You can do all kinds of stuff with fire. It's super easy, it's super cheap, it's super decentralized, it's great. But my guess is that most of you are probably not actually doing these things. Most of you are probably boiling your water in a kettle or in the microwave. Most of you are probably lighting your house by flicking a switch. Okay, sure, some people probably have a wooden stove and heating their house with wood. That's great, but most of us, most of the time, have found that it's better to centralize these things. It's just cheaper. It's more convenient. And if you look at the internet itself was built as a decentralized system. There are, it's true, a few centralized points, for example, the management of domain names. But generally speaking, the internet is a decentralized system, and you can perfectly easily just run the internet from your computer. I'm recording this device on a computer. Recording this talk on a computer now. I could easily just keep that file on this computer, run it as a server on my computer, and just stream it onto the internet from there. It's perfectly decentralized. But I'm probably not going to do that. I'm probably going to upload it to YouTube, even though I don't really like YouTube very much. But, well, it's easy. And that's how things go. That's what we do. And as crypto proceeds, this is what we're going to find, even more than we have done so far, that for all the talk about decentralization, it will become more and more centralized. I mean, we've already seen that in the Bitcoin community when it first started, when Bitcoin mining was easy to do. You could just run a Bitcoin miner on your local computer, and that was great. You could make some Bitcoin just by doing that. Now it requires vastly more computational power, so you can't do that. So it's all centralized in these massive server farms in the desert, where they just like have warehouses full of computers that are just pumping out electricity. Currently, Bitcoin alone, by the way, uses enough electricity to power the entire nation of Thailand. I mean, this is not a small thing. We are consuming these vast quantities of energy and electricity in order to create this pixie dust for people to play with. And the advocates of crypto will say, well, we have more efficient cryptos now, that cost will go down. And the moral logic of this is that I can burn down a forest now so that I can play with my pixie dust, because I imagine that in the future I'll be able to play with my pixie dust while burning down only half a forest. This is the moral logic of the crypto advocates, and it is a sign of how corrupted and how decadent the whole way of thinking is, that this is even entertained for a moment. So the problems with crypto go far beyond mere fact that it doesn't, it doesn't fulfill its requirement of not being regulatable. It's built on technologies that are inherently ridiculously over-engineered and over-complicated. It's not just that it promotes a culture of entitlement and laziness. It's not just that it will enable and further encourage the monopolization of the financial market. Crypto has a number of inherent characteristics that make it even much worse than that. So essentially, how do people make how do people make money from crypto? Well, the first thing to notice is it seems to be like an irony that escapes the crypto advocates, that whenever they talk about how good it is, they'll say, hey, a Bitcoin's like $45,000 now. A Bitcoin is like $60,000 now. I mean, did they ever stop to think what they're actually doing? They're saying that Bitcoin is valuable because I can express its value in terms of actual money? Because it doesn't have any value in itself. It only has value in the sense that it can be converted to actual money. So this is what happens. People will convert their actual money into crypto, and then they will enjoy the feeling of having more and more and more actual money. But to actually do anything with it, then of course they have to convert it back into actual money at the end. And so the crypto is only valued in the sense that it has value that can be measured by actual money. So in this sense, crypto is a Ponzi scheme. You pump money in the bottom and you skim it off the top. And like any Ponzi scheme, it has one crucial resource that it relies on, and that is the greater fool. So the greater fool comes along and puts their money in the system, and that money floats up, and the people who were there first get to skim that money off. This is how it works. Now, so this then reinforces whole bunches of toxic stuff. For example, the adoption of cryptocurrency has always been by those who already have money. Right? Of course, you have to have money to buy the stuff, which essentially means, to a large degree, rich white men. So rich white men buy crypto, and then other people come on as the community expands, pump more money in the bottom, and then they skim it off the top. And so demographically, crypto is a large-scale shift of money from women to men, from the poor to the rich, from people of color to white people. And it reinforces all of the prejudices and biases of the original system because, again, it's not based on actually doing anything meaningful. It's just based on shifting money around based on like a Ponzi scheme. I mean, crypto advocates are admitting this now. There was a crypto advocate just recently who was saying, so what if it's a Ponzi scheme? Ponzi schemes are good. It's not like this is a kind of controversial thing. You end up with money in your pocket, so therefore Ponzi schemes are good. So this then explains why crypto advocates are such intense and annoying evangelists for crypto. Because the only resource that they have is to get somebody else to put more money into it so they can make money. And this, again, speaks to the heart of the moral and spiritual corruption of crypto. It destroys communities. It destroys friendships. It destroys families. And someone who gets caught up in the cult of crypto is not just someone who's made an investment that they might make some profit on. It's somebody who sees all of the people around them as potential targets for their con. And you are no longer their friend. You are their mark. You are no longer their partner, you are their mark. You are no longer their colleague, you are their mark. And in this way, it's like any kind of multi-level marketing scheme. I always remember something that my friend Giles said about this many years ago. He said when he just graduated from uni, he was at a sports club or something, and somebody was talking to him about some kind of sales thing, insurance or something like that. And I said, maybe it's something that you wanted to do, maybe do some insurance or something. And he was a young man who's looking for opportunities. He thought, okay, maybe it might be something. And then as they went on, then the fellow who was trying to convince him of this then said, do you have any what kinds of social links do you have? Clubs, friends, work colleagues, and so on. And then he was like, why is he asking me about this? And then he realized, actually, that's what this is. This is a way of turning friends into customers. This is a way of extending the sphere of the economic world into personal relationships. So I'll never have really a friend going forward. I'll only have people whose money I'm interested in getting hold of. And the bizarre kind of emotionally excessive and irrational behavior of crypto bros is a symptom of this same thing. And so this is why, if you can rebut every point rationally that the crypto people are making, then it doesn't affect them. To paraphrase a great detective, when the rational has been eliminated, then whatever remains, however irrational, must be the truth. So crypto enables, supports, and amplifies the worst instincts of humanity, the instincts of greed, the instincts of laziness, the instincts to reduce everything to a transaction. They will talk about the efficiency and the trustlessness of their transactions. So this is kind of a part of the blockchain ideology, which goes beyond cryptocurrency itself into like trustless contracts and so on. So the idea here is that because everything's recorded and secured with the blockchain, that you no longer have to have relationships of trust. And this is regarded as an efficiency, but again, this is just another level in the stripping of humanity that neoliberalism has brought us. Trust is good. Developing relationships is good. It's not an inefficiency. And in fact, I would argue that the primary benefit of business is precisely to develop relationships between people. And it's not just about moving things around. And it is in the lunches that you have. It is in the conversations over the water cooler. I know that these don't happen over Zoom these days, but bear with me. It is in traveling to another country and sharing a meal with them and getting to know their families. And this is how we create human connections. In the history of Buddhism, if we look at the movement of trade through Asia, through the Silk Road, on the land route on the Silk Road through Central Asia, or the sea route through South and Southeast Asia, from India through to China, then we can see that invariably Buddhism followed along those trade routes. Because these are people. These are people making connections. And yes, of course, part of that connection is purely about finance, purely about business, purely about material things. And that's fine. We need those material things. But there's something more to it than that. And the crypto world wants to strip out humanity, and it wants to see people as being purely a function of their economic usefulness to you. Now, what happens when you do that and you emphasize that you don't need to trust anybody anymore, then you attract, obviously, I mean, surely it should be obvious. What you immediately do is attract people who are not trustworthy. I mean, surely this is obvious, right? That's what's going to happen. People who don't care, people who are quite happy to rip people off, people who are there specifically because they're not capable of developing relationships of trust. And Bitcoin, blockchain, cryptocurrency has been infested with criminals, with fraudsters, with crime of all kinds since its beginning, as it continues to be today. And look, sure, traditional finance, banks and so on, there's plenty of crime going on in those things as well. That's obviously a problem, and that's a problem which needs to be addressed and dealt with through regulation and laws and so on. And, you know, I would argue through many more people becoming monks and not worrying about the economies quite so much. But crypto doesn't do anything to help this situation. In fact, it makes it much worse. So crypto, the primary purpose of crypto is to escape from government oversight. In other words, to evade taxes, to evade financial regulations, and to sneak money around in ways that you don't want the government to be able to see. This is inherently immoral. If you make money, you should declare it. You should pay taxes on it. You should be responsible for the money, and you should understand that you can only make that money because you live in a society that has provided you with many advantages, and it is your responsibility to pay back to that society. There was a recent article on Elon Musk's support for crypto. And as somebody whose wealth is, I think I just saw just now, is now I think $278 billion. And the article finished by rather dryly remarking that in his last tax returns, Elon Musk paid $0 in taxes. So these are the people who are advocates for crypto. This is the kind of person that we're looking for. This has, interestingly enough, a number of implications. Remember that when you run things over crypto, they're stored forever on the blockchain. That means that all these crimes are stored forever on the blockchain, which is kind of interesting. Obviously, organizations like the NSA and others are looking at this. They have these copies of these blockchains themselves, and they're spending millions, probably billions, in these areas. Currently, the encryption that's being used can't be broken, but there's no particular reason why it shouldn't be. Particularly if we move into a realm where quantum computing becomes meaningful. So that'll be an interesting day when they point a quantum computer at the blockchain and decrypt all of the crime that's been done over it for decades. Then that will be an interesting day for law enforcement. Another interesting consequence of this, because blockchain is an append-only spreadsheet, right? So people throw anything in there, and then you have a copy of that in your computer. Now, currently, because it's so ridiculously computationally expensive and energy intensive to do anything with these things, so people won't include like actual data in there. They'll just include URLs or pointers to the data or something like that. But that'll include a lot of stuff like, say, child pornography, like records for like slavers, sex slavers, for things like weapons runners, and so on. In future, of course, if the digital dream of the crypto advocates comes true, then people will start putting actual data into the blockchain, which means that they will be, and this is not a question or a possibility, they absolutely will be encoding child pornography on there, and you will have copies of that on your computer in encrypted form, and you'll never know it. So millions, billions of computers around the world will have all of this child pornography and all of these things, and you'll never be able to get rid of it. Right? It's append only. And once you've encoded child porn into the blockchain, you'll never be able to get it out without just deleting all of the blockchain and all of the resources on it. Again, I mean, it goes on, and I mean, it's almost impossible to talk about all of the sort of horrifying implications of these technologies. And, please don't imagine that these are sort of solved problems. They're really not. There's a really nice website that's just gone up. It's called web3isgoinggreat.com. Subtitle being, and is definitely not an enormous grift that's pouring lighter fluid on our already smouldering planet. And that sort of aggregates so many of the awful things that are happening in the NFT world. I'm just randomly going through some of the articles on there now. Bug in major cryptocurrency trackers shows wildly inaccurate data. So some people were briefly elated or devastated when they looked at Coinbase or CoinMarkup, both major cryptocurrency trackers. A glitch caused some crypto investments to appear to have surged, and so on. So, of course, we know that prices in crypto will surge or collapse depending on a tweet by Elon Musk. So if you think that's a useful way to run an economy, well, I don't really know what to say to you. Further, here we go. Fans are outraged when the Twitter account of now deceased Stan Lee shills an NFT. Oh my goodness. So he's died in 2018, and now his Twitter account is selling an NFT. NFT is a non-fungible token, and it's a sort of one of the kinds of technologies that's advocates of blockchain and so on are trying to do. Essentially, the idea is that to make an NFT is you burn down a forest. So like literally, like to make an NFT uses enough electricity that's like 6 months of normal electricity usage or something like that. So you burn down a forest in order so that you can boast about having ownership over a JPEG file or a GIF, and you have a URL to that, which may or may not work. The the actual thing itself is hosted on someone's server somewhere and is just as much subject to bit rot as anything else on the internet. Anybody can just make a copy of that access. It doesn't mean that you own it yourself and no one can have it, but it means that you have boasting rights to be able to say that you own a blockchain reference to that thing, and you'll spend thousands or something of dollars to have this ridiculous nonsense. Vulcan Forge users lose a collective $135 million in hack. So stolen private keys from the blockchain gaming platform Vulcan Forge enabled attackers to siphon funds out of just shy of 100 user wallets. So $135 million. So one of the things that blockchain definitely does enable is it enables a scale of crime that is simply not possible in the real world. I mean, if you rob a bank, you can't get $135 million from it, right? I mean, the scales of these things are just astonishing. And like anything, regardless of the theoretical security of the technology, it's always breakable because people are idiots, and the more people use these things, the more people you get are idiots. And not only people are idiots, but people who use crypto are criminal idiots, and they will always be seeking to break these things. And again, let's not forget that if thieves are making off with all of this information and all of this data, then obviously governments are doing that as well. And so if you think you're hiding from the government, yeah, no, not really. Okay, what are we going on? Somebody issued a collection of NFTs to profit off the murder of George Floyd. So somebody not related to his family made a bunch of poorly made pixel art NFTs depicting George Floyd, who was murdered by a police officer. And so this is not a social justice thing. It's not making money for his family. It's just a scam. What else do we have? Seattle Kraken NHL teams releasing an NFT. Typing error costs NFT trader nearly $300,000. Yes, a typo cost you $300,000. So one of the big problems with this whole area, again, is that much of the money and much of the resources that's put into it simply gets lost because people lose their password, or people's hard drive crashes, or they throw out their computer, and then like hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars, probably certainly billions of dollars of Bitcoin is simply lost or unavailable because people have lost their password. And again, this is one of the areas where it shows you the meaninglessness of this idea of the efficiency of Bitcoin. Like it's efficient because it reduces financial transaction to a purely digital thing that doesn't involve brick and mortar banks. But of course, the problem is that brick and mortar banks are useful because they have people in them who have jobs, who know what they're doing. And if something goes wrong, you can give them a call and talk to a human being and try to solve your problem. Now, they might not always be very good at that, but there's something. And if you're locked out of your bank account, you can do something about it. If you're locked out of your Bitcoin because you lost the password, you're screwed. That's gone. And it happens all the time. So these examples that I've just read out of some of the problems with Bitcoin, there, and again, just to repeat, the bug in major cryptocurrency trackers, Stan Lee's deceased account shilling crypto, George Floyd's a collection of NFTs making money, Vulcan Forge users losing, well, perhaps Vulcan Forge losers or users lose $135 million. Seattle Kraken NHL team minting NFTs. The typing error costs $300,000. That's all on December the 13th. Okay, this is not an extensive history of the problems with Bitcoin. That's what happened on one day, and we can keep on going if you like. I referenced this a little bit earlier. CoinDesk writer Andrew Thurman says the quiet part out loud. Thurman begins an article by writing, yes, it's a Ponzi scheme, but who cares? So are the dollars in your pocket. So, yes, he's advertising his thing as a Ponzi scheme. So another group called Tether minted more than $3 billion of crypto in 2 weeks. Of course, they claim to be able to back that up. So, of course, the same problem that you have with a regular bank, that if you put your money in the bank and you want to do something with it, so you have to take it out again. And the bank has to be able to back up its financial reserves. And same thing happens with crypto. So what happens if people sell off their crypto and make a run on it? Well, they have to be able to back it up. But these groups who are claiming to have assets of $76 billion is one group. And then, obviously they don't have anything like that amount of money. So there's, again, because of the lack of financial regulations, there's no security around these things. And again, despite the kind of ridiculous propaganda about this being decentralized, the reality is that these billions of dollars are being managed by these huge financial companies. We're going back a few days now. December the 4th, hackers steal about $200 million from Bitmart. Bitmart, the most trusted cryptocurrency trading platform, experienced a major breach in which attackers stole approximately $200 million of various cryptocurrencies due to a stolen private key. Codex, a decentralized publishing platform, aims to artificially constrain access to books. They will upgrade the digital book market to Web 3. So you will reduce the number of books that can be distributed, again, creating artificial scarcity in an abundant world. December the 1st, $120 million is stolen from Badger DAO. 31 on November the 30th. So again, we're now going back a couple of weeks only. $31 million stolen from MonoX in smart contract bug. So again, what happens is that because these things are developed by criminals and by people who are only interested in creating scams, then of course the underlying technologies are dumb and incredibly subject to crime and hacking and so on. And so the idea that these are, one of the things I think a lot of people don't really sort of understand is that people think that this is a tech thing and that tech people are really into this, whereas the reality is that yes, of course some tech people are into this, but it tends to be mostly promoted by criminals and by finance types. Programmers, for the most part, tend to not be interested in these things. They think it's just a scam. Because they understand the technology that it's working on. NFT creator makes more than $7.5 million from artwork he doesn't own. Created NFTs from photographs of a stormtrooper helmet artwork, but failed to actually ask permission from the artists. And then he sold those NFTs. That is, again, just to be clear, you're selling an encrypted blockchain reference, a URL, to a photograph of a stormtrooper helmet that's been painted. That's what the NFT is, and he's done that while actually not paying the artists at all. Here's another nice one. Game developers are forced to recreate their entire game after a bug is discovered. Because Wolfgame put their entire source code into the blockchain, they were unable to patch an exploit once it was discovered. They had to completely recreate the game, reissuing all new tokens to players because of the immutable nature of the blockchain. So again, this is the kind of the craziness of it. Because you can't delete anything on the blockchain, you introduce a bug, the bug is there forever. a DAO. The DAO is a crypto-based contract, like one of these trustless contracts. Raised more than $40 million to try to buy a copy of the United States Constitution, failed, and then stumbled chaotically to its end. So this emerged as a Twitter joke. They then got a few people together, raised some funds to buy a copy of the US Constitution that was up for auction, and then failed to do it. And, just everyone very mad, confused, losing lots of money, fighting, crying, etc., says the headline in Vice magazine. Constitution DAO is shutting down after unrelenting chaos. Some nice headlines here. But, again, one of the things about this, which is so bizarre, is that people think that this is something useful or something new. I mean, if you want to organize a group of people to vote to buy a copy of something at an auction, then, you could have done that perfectly easily in the 90s with technology that was widely available then. And, it doesn't require anything that crypto actually brings to the table. Somebody mints an NFT of 100 stolen furry profile pictures and sells it for $100,000. So the furry community, good on them, have been critical of NFTs. And to those who have pointed out that you can right-click and save files that people are paying enormous amounts of money for pointers to, someone minted an NFT titled Right-Click Save This. So anyway, this is how kind of stupid the whole thing is back and forth. So you could now, whereas again NFTs are supposed to guarantee the rights of people to create things. In fact, people just get whatever they want from whatever they want, mint an NFT out of it, and then make thousands of dollars because people apparently are willing to pay money for this stuff. NFT collector scammed out of almost $100 million. Creators of a skid and another one. Creators of a Squid Game themed token make off with more than $3 million. PR Newswire republished a fake press release which claimed that the Kroger supermarket chain would begin accepting, quote, Bitcoin Cash at its outlets. The fake press release was briefly successful in pumping the value of the currency before it was revealed to be a hoax. Developer of Monkey Jizz cryptocurrency makes off with $270,000. In a twist absolutely no one could have predicted, the developer of a coin called Monkey Jizz ran off with about $270,000. And on it goes. $60 million disappears in an Anubis DAO project within a day of its launch. $60 million disappeared within a day of its launch. Realms of Ruin, a YA storytelling NFT project, collapses hours after launch. 6 popular young adult fiction writers attempted to launch an NFT project where they created a base universe and participants would contribute their own stories. But then the questions around who would own copyright, how teenagers would obtain cryptocurrency and mint NFTs, and the environmental impact led the creators to shutter the project only 5 hours after launch. And on and on and on it goes. So the crypto realm is nothing more than this kind of stuff. It's just a realm of crime, of scams, of Ponzi schemes. It's designed to attract people who cannot make money honestly. It's designed to attract people who are susceptible to conspiracy theory thinking. It's designed to attract people who are poor at creating relationships and who do not trust. And it is designed in order to create a scarcity out of abundance. Cryptocurrency, Web3, Bitcoin, Ethereum, blockchain, and all the rest are a moral abomination. They should not exist. We should ban them. We should just get rid of them, ban the lot of them, and the world will be a better place. They don't solve any problems, and they create a whole bunch of new problems. So if somebody is trying to convince you to buy into crypto or whatever, do not. And you need to treat that person. If someone in your family has bought into the crypto cult, then you need to treat them like somebody who is in a cult. And I would recommend reading up on cults and deprogramming people and trying to figure out a way to try to help them. But for a start, don't indulge them. Don't indulge this nonsense. Don't let them go on. Don't pretend that there is something to it. Don't try to sort of create the impression that this is something about which a sort of meaningful or useful change or conversation is to be had. You need to, at the very least, to be able to just stop it and to move away. And if you can do just that much, then that at least would be something. I could keep going on for a while, but I've probably had enough anyway. So let me just repeat what I said at the beginning, that crypto and allied technologies are immoral. They are immoral by conception and by their purpose, not just incidentally. And they do not create any benefit in the world. They create only harm, and they should be made illegal. They can constitute a move in exactly the wrong direction. They don't solve the actual problems in the world and instead substitute pseudo-solutions that in fact exacerbate all the worst qualities of the existing financial system. The real problems in the world, like climate change, inequality, are problems that can be addressed and are being addressed by various actual real technologies used by actual real people. The biggest problem in the world of money is not trustless contracts or any of this kind of stuff. The really biggest problem is the fact that people like Elon Musk have $278 billion while millions of people go starving. And there is a perfectly good solution to this. It's called tax. Tax is good. We should tax the rich. We should take the money away from them and give it to the poor. And this is not sexy, it's not new, it's not spectacular, but it works. It's real, and it makes an actual real difference in the world. And so if the crypto advocates were intent about actually making the world a better place by reforming our financial systems, then this is what we need to be doing. Vote for a government who will tax the rich. But of course, that's exactly the opposite of what they want. What they want is to become the rich. There was a article I read some time ago by a restaurateur in New York running a fancy restaurant there, and they asked how he got into it. He said when he was a kid, he saw the movie Soylent Green. And this is a science fiction movie in the 70s where most of humanity was eating this kind of paste or something like that. I can't remember what it was all those years ago. And only the rich would have all of this fancy and really nice food. The catch line of the movie, the famous line that everyone remembers, is Soylent Green is people. So yes, all of the plebs, all of you and I are eating this paste which is made up of ground up people, and the rich get to eat all of the fancy food that they want to eat. And when he saw that, he thought to himself, I want to be that guy. I want to be the rich one. And this is what's fueling these people. I want to be him. I want to be the guy who's running the corporation. I want to be the imperator of Mars, like Elon Musk wants to be. He wants to be the emperor of the galaxy. They didn't sort of take a lesson about hubris and moral responsibility and so on from these things. It just amplified their ego. Anyway, so let's get rid of crypto and let's solve the actual problems that are real in the world and that are hurting people and that are creating suffering. The Buddha taught us that sharing things is good. He never taught us about making money, methods for making money out of nothing. He never taught us that we should try to avoid government oversight or anything like that. On the contrary, the Buddha said we should set aside a quarter of our income for dana. And if we have enough money, then we should set aside a quarter of our income to just give it away, in addition to the taxes and so on that we get. That's the Buddha's approach to finance. We should share what we have, a quarter of our income. And if we lived in a world where people were to follow this simple principle and where all those who could afford it shared a quarter of their income with those who are poor, and to protect the weak and vulnerable, to protect the environment, to protect future generations, to protect those who cannot speak for themselves, then it would not be difficult for us to solve these major problems of inequality, of poverty, of hunger, of climate change. That's the problems that we're facing, and that's how we solve them. Anyway, thanks for listening to me going on, if you have been listening to me. And I hope that this has maybe been educational and entertaining. And I wish you have a wonderful day. And I hope that in your life you'll find the peace and the freedom that you seek.